Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spagnola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. And then every once in a while, I do some solo shows because there's some material that maybe I've shared in the Numinous Network or elsewhere that I feel I want to show more broadly. And this is one of those shows. I'm your host, Carmen Spagnola, joining you from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, recently known as Victoria, BC, Canada. And welcome to my Witches New Year Retreat, a podcast series that you can listen to as a personal spiritual retreat to honor the season of the witch and the annual Wheel of the Year festival known as Samhain. Today's episode is devoted to the 2025 Tarot card of the year, the Hermit. So in basic numerology, 2025 is a 9-year, 2 + 2 + 5. If you are looking at a traditional Rider Waite Smith tarot deck, then key 9, the 9th card, is the Hermit. Now, little side note here, if you were a fan of my online course, Intro to Tarot, and you wish it was still around, I just want you to know that we are right now doing a multi-month deep dive into the tarot over in the Numinous Network. So right now, we're just in the middle of the Major Arcana. We're taking 3 months to learn the Major Arcana, and then in the new year, we'll look at the 4 suits and the court cards, and through the spring, we'll do each suit individually, cards 1 to 10, all the pips. So as part of this program, the old archived Intro to Tarot course videos are woven in. So if you wish you still had access to that course, it's trickling back out, only now it has a lot of new expanded material. All you have to do is be a member of the Numinous Network. Okay, so quick review here of Rachel Pollack's 3 dimensions of the Fool's Journey using the 3 lines of the Major Arcana. Okay, so in this, the cycle of the majors, 3 cycles of the majors, you have 3 different lines. The Fool's Journey begins with his bag of hidden talents and everything, and he's taking the leap into the unknown. So the 0 card is sort of set aside or above, perhaps, or at the beginning, wherever you kind of spatially locate that. And then you have the rest of the cards. Now, in the first line, cards 1 to 7, the Magician to the Chariot, this is where the Fool is engaging with the material levels of life. So the kind of interpersonal and relational and like childhood things that we deal with. So the Fool has this synchronicitous encounter with the Magician and perhaps the stirring of the magic or the gifts within himself. So that is like the initiatory call to action. They connect with the universe, channeling that energy into something powerful in the world. Then they encounter their intuitive and more hidden self, their subconscious, and start to look at the deeper mysteries of the cosmos via the High Priestess. From there, the Fool grows and matures into the Empress, who then matures into the Emperor. The Hierophant is the stage where the Fool learns about how society is created through structures of authority and hierarchy and is shaped by religion and rules and patriarchy in the name of morality and values. Then with that instruction, the Fool moves into the archetypal experience of the Lover's card, where they discover their sexuality, they engage with their preferences, but also, and I think most importantly, their priorities, their values, and they choose which path forward they want to take, like where they will devote their energy, either to love, financial security, status, spiritual fulfillment, whatever makes them feel more secure. When they reach the Chariot card, the Fool is like achieving success on the material plane, but they're driving forward by this strong will and their conviction. It does feel divinely guided, but it's very much moving forward due to their like brute force effort and their enthusiasm and their energy and their tenacity. Then we come to the second line, cards 8 to 14. This is strength to temperance. And now the Fool is doing a lot of the learning. The developmental tasks are on the mental level and in their adulthood, like becoming an adult, relating to the social world, society, and things that are outside their own self-reflection, but like reflecting outwards and engaging with the world. So they're on the mental plane. But now with the success and kind of momentum they've gotten just getting through that first line, the Fool now needs to learn how to bring some discipline and focus and skillfulness and containment to tame their inner beast in the Strength card. So we see like this natural connection and a segue between the Chariot and the Strength cards with the lions, but now we've got this contrast of the binary. So first it's a man, then it's a woman. And that happens a couple of times thematically in the deck where we see these binary energies, Magician, Priestess, Empress, Emperor, and now we have Chariot, Strength. So this leads the Fool to look inward with the Hermit card. And their inner knowing leads them to understand the cyclical nature of the world by the time they arrive at the Wheel of Fortune. So this challenges them to develop discernment and a sense of justice. So they're at the Justice card, and here they are once again confronted by institutional authority, and they're forced to learn about how the world works at present, how it ought to work, and where they stand in relation to power. And again, I appreciate like the symmetry and the naturalness of the order of things. Like first, there's awareness of institutional power structures on the material plane, but we don't arrive until like later, we don't actually get to where do I stand in relation to that. So I think that's, there's some history there about the order of the Justice and the Strength card. This is the way that I think it makes sense in the Fool's journey. And then after this understanding, they undergo the transformative change of perspective in the Hanged One or the Hanged Man. After that, they leave their past behind with the Death card, and they emerge with greater balance, restraint, discernment, and harmony in the Temperance card, which is the final card of the second line. Now we are leveling up the third line, cards 15 to 21. It's the Devil to the World card, and now the Fool is really on their spiritual journey. So this is them grappling with spiritual developmental tasks, soul development, their higher self. So here on the spiritual plane in the Devil card, they realize they're still quite attached to the material plane, and that becomes their downfall in the Tower card, which comes next. This leads them to the Star card, which is sort of the eye of the storm, a place of calm contemplation, even some optimism, or at least an ability to like take the long view in that Star card. By the time they get to the Moon card, they're like a bit ragged. They're a bit downtrodden, maybe depleted, a bit confused, but they do move forward to clarity and renewal in the Sun. And then here again, kind of much later in the sequence of this dimension, the Fool is subjected to the Judgment card, a sort of karmic accounting, which leads them to their ultimate destination, where they feel fulfilled and whole and well integrated at the World card. So let's focus in on the Hermit. 2025 being the card that is overlit, let's say. 2025 is overlighted by the Hermit card. Now, the Hermit as a number 9 is already going to have a sense of like, this is not the Fool in the early part of a journey. If you think of a simple numerology, like card 1 to 10, where 1 is the beginning and 10 is the culmination, but also like has 1 and 0 together. Culmination, but we're kind of back at the beginning of something new. So what is number 9? Number 9 is that like, it's the stamina we need to like get yourself over the finish line, right? So this person has already been on quite a long journey. This is not their first time at the rodeo. I think it's also worth saying right now that the Hermit card is ruled by Mercury. So if you have a sense of what that means for you, Mercury as an air sign, Mercury as being about conveyance, getting you where you need to go, and certainly about communication and kind of a personal sense of clarity and like leadership in that kind of way. Like you can get where you need to go because you're very clear. So these are aspects of the Hermit that come in 2025. The Hermit is about both the pursuit of wisdom and the transmission of wisdom. So this is the card of the mentor. And sometimes you pull this card because you are the mentor, but sometimes you pull this card because you're in need of a mentor, or you are in need of some respite and a retreat so that you can become the mentor. So the qualities of the Hermit help you discern which is the case for you. Are you the mentor? Are you the mentor who needs a retreat? Are you the seeker of a mentor? Are you the initiate who is trying to become the adept? So the qualities of the Hermit will help you figure out which that is for you if it's not super obvious. And the qualities of the Hermit card are introspection, humility, solitude. It has a very contemplative and meditative quality. It really focuses on spiritual enlightenment rather than worldly power or status. So when I just like right off the bat, many of you know I do an annual intuitive planning workshop, and we spend an entire day like planning our year ahead. And I usually do one in the fall and one in the new year. And this fall has just been too bonkers personally and collectively. Perhaps there will be something in later November, but I don't guarantee that at all. But for sure, in the beginning of January, there will be. And when I see, as an entrepreneur, when I see a year that is, got the Hermit card as the mentor for the year, the card of the year, I'm not going to be doing a ton of trying to garner a ton of attention, really. And if I am, it's like introverts of the world unite. If I'm going to gather people, it's so that they can have their own meditative experience, or, things that would be self-paced, self-guided, things that are encouraging someone to contemplate. I might make those kinds of offerings, but I'm not going to be like, hey, we're having a big summit and it's all about connection. Like, that's just, no. People are decompressing. People are turning within. People are soul searching. So that's just a little sidebar to keep in mind. Okay. So here again, we can compare to the first line, because the Hermit is like another iteration of the High Priestess in a sense. The High Priestess was like the gateway to the divine and the keeper of secret knowledge. The Hermit is now directly experiencing that knowledge for themselves and turning inward with it. So there's a retreat from the concerns of the world, not because they are not concerned about the world, but because they are in preparation, because they are gathering resources, because they are also like waiting for the right moment. So they step down from any pedestal and instead they hold this lantern. If you look at the Hermit card, and you can go on Google and just look up the Hermit card, Rider Waite Smith, it's right there. I can link to it in the show notes, but pretty classic imagery in what we call North America and also in Europe. Instead, this Hermit is holding up this lantern, and in it is a star, and it's a very specific star. It's the same star that we see in the star card. It is the spark of divine wisdom, and you can go into a whole bunch of the history and the lore of this being the Star of Solomon, and if that means something to you, great, but you don't even need to know that. You just need to know that the Hermit comes off the pedestal and is standing on solid ground, but is holding up the light of wisdom, divine wisdom. The Hermit is holding up that spiritual knowledge, trying to offer guidance. And if you have a spread of cards, you're doing like a tarot spread, you can look to the neighboring cards of the Hermit, whatever is like beside it in a reading, to get a better sense of whether the seeker is embodying the Hermit as a guide for others, or whether the seeker should be connecting with a mentor to advance their spiritual development. So, looking ahead to 2025 as a Hermit card year, considering some of the planetary transits next year, there's 2 major transits involving outer planets, which are going to impact us globally, like a major societal and historical timescales. So we're going to want to prepare for that. And that will put many of us into that soul searching stance. This year, 2024, Pluto changed signs, which only happens every generation, 11 to 30 years. Next year, Saturn's changing signs, which happens only every 2.5 years or so, and Neptune's changing signs, which is only every 14 years. So there's if you include the Pluto changing signs this year, because it's kind of bridging 2024 and 2025, those 3 influences, they're mega. Remember in elementary school, Gen X? Mega. That's a mega transit. It's so mega. Okay, so in the past, historically, these transits, what they look like Neptune moving into Aries and Pluto in Aquarius at the same time. When we look back through history, that's 60 to 73 BCE, when Boudica and her Iceni tribe revolted against the Romans in Britain. It was absolutely huge. So revolution. In 1534 to 1547, Henry VIII broke from Rome. He declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. And that led to endless fighting between Catholics and Protestants. Kind of pretty much the impact still being felt today, certainly in places like Ireland. 1861 to 1874, the U.S. Civil War divided the nation into North and South. So fighting over state powers and the abolition of slavery, so revolution. The last cycle started in 1861, just after Neptune was discovered while it was in Aquarius. So this was the time where we saw the dissolution of the powers of the monarchy and the church. It went from being the major center of everyone's life, in the Western world anyway, to an era of scientific advancement and invention. This is when we see the flourishing of our modern arts that include photography and film and recorded sound. It was also, relevant to what we're doing right now. It was also the dawn of spiritualism and the New Thought movement. And that was led by figures like Madame Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley, Arthur Waite, and Pamela Colman Smith, who wrote the Rider Waite Smith deck, which we're studying here with the Hermit card. And it was then, quite notably for our purposes, the tarot began to be manufactured and distributed globally. So revolutionary things happen during these types of transits. It's not going to be the same everywhere, but they have generational reverberations. So both the tarot and the planets are telling us that 2025 is going to be about major psycho-spiritual growth and changes on the collective level. So we should be thinking about where do we stand on issues that affect the entire globe, like climate change, like capitalism, like genocide, and things that affect all of humanity, right? So yeah, we need to really have a stance on ethno-states. What makes a state's right to exist real? Is that true? Is it true that states have a right, ethno-states in particular, have a right to exist? What is the UN? Is it still useful? What should it be? What should we do about apartheid when neighbor states or other nation states that are not our neighbors are carrying that out? What kind of person do we want to be in all this? Because we obviously are not pulling the levers of power at the highest levels, but we can ask ourselves, How are we going to carry ourselves during a period of widespread, intense, and revolutionary social and emotional and environmental upheaval? What is our role? What are we going to do if like war or crisis comes to where we are? What role are we preparing to play? So like the hermit didn't come to dick around, they're not dicking around. The hermit is like here for the big themes and the big questions and is saying, go ahead, take a year, like think about it. So 2025 as a hermit year is going to be the year where we are challenged to, in no particular order, here's a list. We are challenged to reclaim our own authority, act with integrity, take time for introspection, embrace a kind of like unhindered, unbothered, unhurried kind of vibe about proceeding in alignment with our values. Speaking of which, like get to know our values on a deeper level, get to know ourselves on a deeper level. What do we believe in? What are we willing to do to show that we believe in that? We want to seek out mentors who will nurture our soul's development. And so potentially, just on a very mundane level, it could be a good year for a new therapist. Does your therapist have very clearly stated values? We will be challenged to be more devoted in our pursuit of wisdom, higher learning, to become more enlightened, especially around ethics and philosophy, to make space in our lives for retreat or accept and befriend seclusion and solitude. And so, just a little note here, it would be smart if we had another pandemic, if we did lockdowns earlier, sooner, longer. That doesn't feel like something that's going to be likely in the world that we have right now, but this is a perfect example of like, what would you be willing to do to step into the mentor archetype? And that would be to be kind of out in front with the social proof that lockdowns are what work to eradicate pandemics. So, okay. Potentially, we have to change the direction our life is headed in and be open to shining a light on other possibilities, be open to receiving that information through dreams, intuitive journeys, and instinct. We'll also be challenged to lean on the things that give us stability and support. So materially, just making our lives a lot simpler, less complex, less financial pressure, and also philosophically, like again, what is truth for us? We know there are multiple truths. What is our truth? And lean on that. We'll also be challenged to evaluate whether our relationships are deep enough, honest enough, intimate enough for us. We also will learn to become more satisfiable. So letting go of pursuing wealth and status in favor of contentment. We'll also want to be a little more reserved with our energy, practice prudence, practice discernment with our resources. So with our money, for sure, saving our money, but also with our energy. So again, like I'm not going to be out there or even trying to encourage other people to be out there, expending a lot of energy. I want people, myself included, to be conserving energy and being very observant so that when we know that it's time to act, we can act with decision and conviction. And then finally, we will be challenged to cultivate patience, take the long view, play the long game, pace ourselves, and commit to being steadfast. I think the last thing I want to say is it's always worth noting that the hermit appears to live in the dark. Yes, that's why the hermit has a lantern. So it would appear that like the seeker who gets this card next year, all of us, it appears the seeker is in this like pretty cold and lonely part of their path. It's a time when they're learning to see in the dark. If you've listened to that episode of the Numinous podcast, Learning to See in the Dark, then you know what we're focusing on. Truth, justice, freedom, healing, focusing on spirit and these, cardinal points in our development and our understanding of the world. Truth, justice, freedom, healing. These are the themes that spiritual wisdom is concerned with, not personal achievement, not our purpose, or even our contribution or our legacy. Like, it's very philosophical. Truth, justice, freedom, healing. And these are not easy subjects to parse. This is why we needed the strength card to come first, because it's not an easy path. But, yeah. Does the Hermit look like he's on an easy path? No, it's pretty austere. But this card helps us accomplish a critical developmental task on the spiritual level, and that's the capacity for self-reflection and for reorientation. I'd like to wrap up this overview of the Hermit and the Hermit archetype with a quote that I'm reading from a book called Red Tarot, A Decolonial Guide to Divinatory Literacy. It's written by Christopher Marmolejo, and they are a brown, queer, and trans writer, diviner, and educator. I think this quote here, so it's actually a quote within this quote. In other words, they are quoting a teacher called Lame Deer, and it describes kind of a bigger picture aspect of the Hermit as what in the past in certain cultures we may have called like a shaman type of role. So the Hermit will have a shamanistic quality in our lives where we have now unmediated access to the other world. So in Marmolejo's book, this is what I'd like to share. Lame Deer probably said it more concisely. I believe that being a medicine man, more than anything else, is a state of mind, a way of looking at and understanding this earth, a sense of what it's all about. In a sense, the person was set aside from ordinary individuals, living an isolated life in which higher invisible powers controlled much of what that person did. Thus, a medicine man may be sitting in a congenial social atmosphere and yet be receiving information he hears perfectly, but is inaudible to anyone else in the group. Most people place their dependence on the medicine man, who understands this life and all its surroundings and is able to predict what will come to pass. They have the right to make these predictions. If as we sit here, we should hear a voice speaking from above, it would be because we had the light to hear what others could not hear. Or we might see what others had not the right to see because they were not properly qualified. Communication with the higher powers has its limitations, as we can see. The spirits do not confer powers on anyone, but seem to recognize that certain people are chosen to fulfill certain tasks and missions. There seems to be an aspect of the predestination inherent in the recognition of a medicine man. The voices people heard in a dream or vision are addressed specifically to them and their situation, and lead one to conclude that each individual has already received an outline for his or her life and need only to recognize their unique inherent possibilities. So the Hermit is one who might hear or see things that others don't, but any of us can tap into Hermit energy or the Hermit archetype in order to connect with what we know in our bones is ours, is us. I want to also just share a little affirmation you can use, something you can think of when addressing the Hermit in your life. This comes from Benabel Wen's excellent reference book, Holistic Tarot. So the affirmation with the Hermit card is, I heed the wisdom of the ages. Introspection is the inner light that illuminates my lantern. Finally, here's a practice you could do. You could take your Hermit card out of your deck and put it on your altar and then do a 5-card spread. And here are some prompts for that spread. And however you want to place them is fine. They could go left to right. They could cascade down in a diamond shape. They could be in a circle. However you want to put it. You want to just draw these cards, keep them face down, and then slowly go through and flip them over and just journal your impressions of what comes to you as you consider the card you've pulled as a response to the prompt. So here are the Hermit card spread prompts. The first query is, what is an important lesson for me to contemplate in the coming year? What is an important lesson for me to contemplate in the coming year? The second prompt is, what is keeping me from engaging wholeheartedly with this lesson? Another way of putting that could be, what needs illumination? What is keeping me from engaging wholeheartedly with this lesson? What needs illumination? The third card is, what is the best use of my resources in this upcoming year? And when we say resources, what I mean is like your time, your energy, your money. What is the best use of my resources in this upcoming year? The fourth card you pull, the query is, what can support me in staying true to myself, my values, my ethics? What can support me in staying true to myself, my values, my ethics? And finally, what quality, if embraced, will help me step more fully into my role as a mentor? So the fifth card you draw, the query is, what quality, if embraced, will help me step more fully into my role as a mentor? If you like this episode and you want to leave me some feedback, or if you have a question for me, you can go to the show notes in your podcast player and you will find a link to leave feedback. Or you could go to the show notes at numenospodcast.com. And that's where you'll find the link. Otherwise, if you want, you could just open up a fresh browser tab and go to castfeedback.com/numenospodcast. I'd love it if you left me a voice note or a written note. Either one is fine. Don't hesitate. I'm wide open. Just drop me a line. My listener shout out today, I would like to thank Andrea, who left this feedback for me. Andrea wrote, I love your podcast. It's been revelatory, both educationally and spiritually. I always leave inspired, and oftentimes your content has led me down paths that have enriched my life or aided me in supporting others. Thank you, Andrea. I super appreciate that. That feels like what it's all about, right? Is we hope that there's a ripple effect. I love to hear that it's helped you in supporting other people. Glad you found it supportive yourself. Okay, next up is the wrap-up episodes here of the Witches New Year Retreat. I'm going to be speaking with Hummingbird Star about a little bit more about the Hermit card. And then we're going to talk about some of the outer planet movements that are going to happen in 2025, meaning the ones that are going to be, that I referenced in this episode today. So like the large societal shifts. And we're talking about climate change. We're talking a lot about climate change and sort of near and midterm impacts that we might be seeing. So you may want to skip this one if you're just like really enjoying having this like lovely, cozy, contemplative retreat and like you don't want to disturb your peace. Consider skipping that, and you can go to the very final episode of the Witches New Year Retreat. It's already available, and that's where I'm sharing a preview of my forthcoming book titled Spells for the Apocalypse: Practical Magic for Turbulent Times. I'm going to talk about 2 different rituals in that book, one to challenge fear and one to affirm wholeness. And if you've enjoyed this retreat and want to ensure you do make time for introspection and spiritual growth during this upcoming Hermit year, do join us in the Numinous Network. I host live sessions every month around intuition development. We do divination at our monthly tutorials. We gather for altar time and trance work and rituals for Wheel of the Year. And it's just a lot of fun. And it's really lovely to connect with people who are into witchcraft and divination, and also attachment, somatics, trauma recovery, collapse, all the other things we're doing. It's a very, very cool niche. So if this type of thing is your jam, do come join us. Find out more at carmenspagnola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.